humanitarian teams to make use of good risk assessment and analysis practices to frame their cooperation agreements with member states. And we've been working with UNITAR to turn what we think are very good resources and tools for risk assessment in support of UN common country assessments and humanitarian needs overviews into useful but very practical and easy to use online resources. And I've had the news that so far we've only had this alive for the last month, and already we have had over 500 participants in the training course, which is a really good and outstanding result. So that shows there's a lot of interest in this. And the aim is to ensure that our partners and countries can pick up and quickly understand, refresh their memories, and support each other to better improve the risk assessment and risk analysis approaches. Now, while the products have been designed specifically with the idea of embedding risk assessment practice in UN and member states cooperation frameworks, they are also very useful, we believe, for sector planning and also for the planning of individual agencies. We have to say that the process of working on these tools with UNITAR has been very instructive, productive, but also fun. And our UNITAR colleagues have shown us a very good sense of adult learning pedagogies and also how to make what's useful, usable, and practical. These new risk assessment products will join a handful of other collaborations with UNITAR and will surely be joined by further resources, and we know of some coming forth, for example, on early warning systems as our partnership continues. And with this, it's my pleasure to now ask UNDRR SRSG Kamal Kishore to give his opening remarks.
Thank you very much, Laurie. This is really a very important occasion and launch of a very important, timely, and very useful and much needed tool for UN country teams and other stakeholders at the country level. I just returned from a back-to-back mission to 3 countries in Africa: Tanzania, Kenya, and Ethiopia. And in each one of these 3 countries, disaster risk issues are really affecting everything that UN country teams do, whether in the development space or in the humanitarian space. Take, for example, Kenya, several years of consecutive drought, followed by massive floods, including urban floods. So in such a context, you can't do your country cooperation frameworks assuming that nothing will happen. So risk assessment really has to be a core piece of whatever we do. Risk assessment has to underpin our country level planning. And UN country teams, I could see that in my interaction with the resident coordinators, are asking for that kind of support. And the scale at which this support is needed, we cannot possibly do retail from here. We really have to create enabling conditions so that the country teams themselves, colleagues in the country teams, have the tools, the support they need to be able to do this analysis and do it not just for themselves, but also work alongside their government counterparts to also do risk assessments for sector planning, as you just mentioned. And in this regard, I think the partnership we have with UNITAR is great. I think we are building on our complementary strengths. UNITAR knows how to do training for development and humanitarian needs, the pedagogy of adult learning. And we know the risk assessment, the substantive content of this. So this coming together can really be a game changer in terms of the kind of support we provide to UN country teams. I just have a few things forward-looking that I want to say. The first thing is that we really have to keep this a dynamic thing. So it's great that we have such a large uptake in the first month itself. I expect that this will grow further and quite rapidly. So whatever feedback we get from that process, we should use that to continually refine the tool. So I think it's not something which is static. The second thing is that in some instances, maybe not all, I think there may be some backup required. Like people use the tool, but they want to go deeper. So what is the kind of system we put in place to do the next level of more in-depth hand-holding? Let's see what is the kind of demand that emanates from the fields to do that. So I think that's the second thing. And the third is that I think the more we can popularize it outside of the UN as well, because it's not just within the UN country teams that there is demand. There is wider demand for this. Over the last 10 years, the advocacy led by UNDRR has really created a social demand for better understanding of risk. And we need to now service that demand. So I think we should explore how this tool can be modified, adapted, etc., to serve the needs of other stakeholders outside of the UN as well. Great, extremely delighted to be here at this launch, and quite looking forward to how it begins to make an impact at the country level. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, SRSG Kishore. I'm now pleased to ask Mr. Vikelsa to deliver his remarks.
Thank you, Loretta. And, it's a pleasure for me to join Kamal Kishore, the newly appointed SRSG. It's a great pleasure to be sharing a platform with him. And of course, learning is the start of behavioral change. Unless we learn about the things that we are going to talk about today, it'll be very difficult for you to lead these kind of efforts in the countries where you are representing the UN and in radiating these to the larger learning community in your countries to make our policies and many of the issues that we're going to discuss today effective. This is not the first time that we are jointly delivering and developing these products. We've done it in the past. We've done it on making cities resilient courses and the public health system resilience, which we did last time. And now we are looking at risk assessment for national planning processes and humanitarian program cycle courses, as well as a common country assessment, focusing on how to develop multidimensional analysis of risk. And all these are necessary weapons in the arsenal of all of you who are working at the country level. Without being adequately equipped yourself, you'll find it very difficult to teach and get the knowledge around these kinds of things for the governments that you are working with, and contextualizing it and making it relevant to your local objectives. Now, this is basically what I wanted to say, that we are not the masters of content in UNITAR, but we do pride ourselves in the pedagogy of learning and the methodology of training. And it's good to join up with the content masters in many of these issues and jointly develop products with them and use our modalities of being able to get the penny to drop in the minds of adult brains. Adult brains are very resistant to learning, and our ability to reach all of you and through you to reach the larger communities that we want to reach is extremely important. On the courses that we're about to launch, on what we do in UNITAR, how we continue to partner with UNDRR, that's probably what I needed to say. But I did want to talk about something more. And since I have you as a captive audience, I thought I would brainstorm with you, and you can give your comments later on in writing. As Kamal mentioned, there is a larger mission of the United Nations around early warning systems. And how do we get them in order? How do we develop these early warning capacities in many of your countries? And I wanted to tell all of you that UNITAR is home to the UN Satellite Center. Mm-hmm. And SAT we used to call it in the past, but the Economic and Social Council decided to re-Christian us as the UN Satellite Center. Under that program, we built a lot of capacities in some countries, including in countries like Bhutan and Nepal, on early warning capacity building, on satellite imagery analysis, on drone analysis and satellite imagery analysis, in which we have a wonderful partner in CERN. So between CERN and UNITAR and some of these poor countries, we've trained 75 to 80 people per country in analyzing the images themselves. So Images, as you all know, are relatively easy to obtain now. They're relatively free of cost. And our ability to process this information is the basic hurdle between getting the images and analyzing them and applying them for all ranges of the problems of disasters, from early warning to assessment of loss and damage, and for subsequent policy and other actions that are taken in the places where disaster has struck. So I do want to be able to establish, along with UNDRR and the other partners in this, the UNDP, the other country teams, capacities in each one of your countries for this, for local authorities. And we've often wondered whether these should be located in the FEMA equivalents in your countries, or should they be in the offices of presidents and prime ministers? So do give me and give us feedback on, do you think it's useful? Would you be able to identify people in the countries where you are as to who needs this training? Where are they located? What would it take? We've trained about 75 people in Bhutan, for example, in the Ministry of Land Use Planning. But each country is specific and each situation is different. So give us some feedback. We want to develop this jointly and make this a capacity which is available in all your countries. So I just wanted to mention that en passant, because that is not directly linked to the learning courses that we are launching today, but it's something to which I and now the UN is attaching a great deal of importance. So let me end there with thanking you for being with us, for listening to us, and for putting energy behind making all these courses valuable and useful in the context where you're serving. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Director Seth. And indeed, early warning systems is an area where UNDRR and UNISAT and UNITAR will strengthen its collaboration as we move much more towards operationalization with member states. So thank you for this. Now this event is officially launched. I'm about ready to turn over to our online moderator, Adam Fish, but I'd like to thank both of you first for your opening comments. We are now going to have a brief demonstration of the training material on the platform, but we'll also have feedback from users of the resources, including the UN Resident Coordinator of El Salvador, Raul Salazar, and the Intercluster Coordinator from Yemen, Jali Shah. So these are colleagues who have been working with these tools, and we'll have some feedback on how they have been useful in their context. But first, let me hand over to my colleague, Adam Fish, who is going to take us through the tool. Thank you. Thank you again.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon. This is a very exciting moment, and we have a very promising collaboration in front of us, and one that I think we should expect to see more from in the coming years, coming days and weeks and years. I would like to share with you a few of the walkthroughs of how the system works, what some of the training material looks like, how you can access it and how you can use it. You'll notice that I have already put into the chat the link to access the training material itself. And now I believe I'm sharing my screen so that you can see how to access the content. So in front of you, you should see the UNITAR main webpage. Anybody wanting to access the new training content that we're talking about today can click on See Our Main Catalog here, our full catalog, which will take you to the second page, the event page. Here you can scroll through to People, and under the People tab, you'll see a number of new trainings, including risk assessment for national planning processes and risk assessment for national planning processes self-paced, the common country assessment, and the humanitarian program cycle. The link I've just given you is to this page, which is the portfolio page for all of the new risk analysis training. So if you're on that, if you follow that link, you'll be able to click this link, which will take you to an overview of all of the new training courses, and indeed some historical training that has been part of a collaboration between UNDRR and UNITAR as well. So what I will do very quickly now is to give you a look. I registered for these, so if you will be taking these, you'll need to register. Registration is free. It says that there is a deadline to register. The deadline is not a real deadline, but it will help us to remember to update the material and every year make sure that the examples are up to date, that the process is still correct. What you have seen in these three main courses is it's for slightly different audiences. So in the first ones, risk assessment for national planning processes facilitated and self-paced. These are very similar, and these are sort of the taster. This is the on-ramp overview of what is in the training material, what is in the technical material. This is something that we envisage would be used by UN resident coordinators or humanitarian country team coordinators, or even maybe a minister or a sector lead, to give them an idea of what is it that we're talking about? What is the risk assessment process? How does it integrate into the planning tool that we're talking about? As the SRSG said, a lot of the expectation is that the processes that are common to doing risk assessment for a common country assessment or for an HNO or similar processes of risk assessment, the output, the CCA or the Humanitarian Needs Overview is a slightly different one, but the process is fairly similar. So I'll give you a quick overview of these training courses, the onboarding processes, and then I'll give you a little preview of the humanitarian program cycle and the common country assessment specifically. I will, because I've already registered, I'll just click straight into these and I will launch the first module here. With this, you'll see the very beautifully designed front page that UNITAR has put together for these materials. There's also a very easy to navigate table of contents, which means that anybody who wants to jump to a particular part can do so fairly easily. I'll close the table of contents though and do a quick walkthrough. So at the very beginning, you'll see that there's a lot of interactive content. There are a number of elements that can be clicked on for more information. There's the normal navigation menu as well, and subtitles are available. So clicking through, we'll get first some high-level sort of commonly used abbreviations and links to some key documents that have the terms of art for disaster risk reduction. These open, as you see, the PDF with the table of contents and the terminology for DRR, or the 2009 terminology as well. These are curriculums. Advancing from this, we'll get to the learning objectives. And as I said, this is the high level one. This is the broad overview. So this one is really for national planners or for the UNRC, for example, to sort of get an idea of what is the training for, why are we doing this, what to expect from it for the participants. The table of contents is very easy to navigate. You can skip along fairly easily from the understanding risk part to what is the service, what is the offer from these tools. As you can see, the design is very attractive. I think it's excellent. As I said, this one gives some very broad overview. It's important to recognize that risk is one of those topics that everybody faces risk, but there are specific terms and there are specific practices required for disaster risk assessment and understanding and management. So this is really going through some of the fundamentals of why do we do this? How does risk affect development? How does the process of risk data and risk analysis inform planning? And there's a little video here, which I will share with you to give a bit of background. I hope that is sharing audio as well. Somebody will tell me if it's not.
Although one of the major successes over the past century has been the dramatic decline in global deaths from disasters, many populations are more vulnerable to disaster impact. Many of the drivers of hazards are intensifying, as in the case with hazards driven by climate variables, and trends related to exposure and vulnerability are often not trending toward resilience. Growing unplanned urbanization, unregulated construction, aging infrastructure, systems not fit for modern demands can result in increased risk for people and assets. What is disaster risk? Disaster risk refers to the probability of impact, loss of life, injury, or destroyed or damaged assets that could occur to a system, society, or community in a specific period of time as a function of hazard, exposure, vulnerability, resilience, and capacity. What is disaster risk analysis? a qualitative or quantitative approach to determine the nature and extent of disaster risk by analyzing hazards and evaluating existing conditions of exposure and vulnerability that together could result in harm to people, property, services, livelihoods, and the environment on which they depend. Risk analysis is always incomplete as drivers of risk are in continuous flux and the interconnections of systems are dynamic. It is important to try to understand the processes at play without assuming that we can have perfect knowledge. Importance of disaster risk analysis for disaster risk reduction. The assessment of disaster risk for different communities is an important step to plan for and take appropriate action towards its management and reduction. Disaster risk reduction is aimed at preventing new and reducing existing disaster risk and managing residual risk, all of which contribute to strengthening resilience and therefore to sustainable development. Disaster risk analysis is important because it provides a better understanding of interconnected risks and offers ways to reflect on the impact of emerging global trends on local contexts. Allows decision makers at different scales and across sectors to see where their interventions and plans can make a difference in risk. Demonstrates the multiple dividends of resilience building. The process of doing risk analysis brings stakeholders from across the nexus together to discuss and analyze the main components of risk, hazard, exposure, and vulnerability, and to find ways to connect peace building, humanitarian, and development decisions.
So that was one of a handful of videos that's available in this training. As you can see, there are a number of interactive elements as well. If you hover over these, you can see that they are clickable, which gives you a little bit more depth in each of these topics. This one's talking about preventing new disaster risk, reducing existing disaster risk, and managing residual risk. These are concepts that have been part of UNDRR's sort of core messaging for quite a long time, but they're really important concepts and foundational concepts in why we understand disaster risk, how we understand disaster risk, and how these planning processes can support risk reduction. The example here shows a handful of products that we've developed in each of these countries. You can see that you can click on these and it opens again a new topic, a new screen, this time showing some spotlights. So it's with some foundational risk information that's available for, in this case, Somalia, if I'm not mistaken. That's the one I clicked on. We have a handful of other ones as well. And again, it is a very attractive, interactive format. I'll not play this next video. I think we'll skip to the presentation from the RC from El Salvador in just a moment. But just to give you an idea of some of the more interactive content and what's possible with this platform. So you can skip through and find some of the key takeaways, some of the steps that are part of this process, like what role UNDRR plays in this, or some of the data categories that you can expect to start to interrogate when you're trying to gather the risk information needed to make good national planning. I think this is an important one to consider because I think a lot of times when people are thinking about disaster risk, they're thinking about only the hazard category. You know, they're thinking about earthquakes or floods or storms, and that's easy. But what's equally important when you need to understand disaster risk is where are the people? What are the economic or social vulnerabilities related to people or environment or ecosystems or economies? How is climate change affecting things? What are some of the historical past losses that can inform future risk? So all of these categories are part of what we're using to sort of sensitize these planners about what's needed to make good risk-informed decisions and give them an idea of what's included in these training packages. The idea, I think, is so that they would be able to identify how this would be useful as they're planning their CCAs or HNOs. Who from the country team would be a good person to bring into this, looking at the roles of UN agencies and other organizations, the private sector or academia, and the important data literacy that goes with this, because we're really trying to make evidence-informed decisions, evidence-informed plans. So there is a sort of underlying capacity development requirement for data literacy as well. There are a couple of examples in this as well of some analysis that UNDRR has done with specific deep dives in helping the UNRC's office to do a sort of richer analysis in Fiji and South Sudan. I think there are links to those at the end of this, and I'll just show you here. The end point of this onboarding package, which is a fairly light one, is a handful of core documents that we would use to sort of make it available, make it easy for somebody to recognize what is the guidance, what are the foundations, what are the foundational concepts that make it easy to understand how this is meant to be used. So that is the overview training course. That is the onboarding one that we would use to bring on board RC or give them an idea. And maybe before I go any further, I will play a brief video that we've had recorded from the RC in El Salvador and Belize. This is our colleague, Raul Salazar.
Dear participants, it's an honor to address you in this online training session on risk analysis. And first, I would like to thank the United Nations Office for Disaster Risk Reduction for the invitation to share with you the thoughts. El Salvador is one of the countries where UNDRR, in collaboration with the Office of the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, have implemented for the first time this analysis, not only on the application of this analysis in the humanitarian response plans, which is an important element of how the UN responds to emergencies at the country level, but also, more importantly, I would think, in the planning process of the Sustainable Development Cooperation Framework, through the integration of this analysis in the common country analysis. And as you the process that we implemented here allows to have a thorough and exhaustive analysis covering a wide range of risks that were grounded in concrete data and historical evidence that we built together with the government of El Salvador. And an innovative element that was included in this analysis were the cascade effects that are originated in different and specific risks. In the case of El Salvador, for example, we have droughts that whenever the droughts happen, might not only generate food insecurity and increase poverty in rural producers, but also add to the critical flows of migration in Central America and in many occasions force displacements to the climate hazards. In a country where nearly 40% of the basic food baskets are imports, the analysis allowed to identify how the occurrence of disruptions, such as a social crisis happening in a neighbor country that have direct impacts in transport, could not only affect the food chain and access to food and food prices in El Salvador, but also generate indirect impacts in education through the school feeding programs, or go as far as to impact aspects of prevention of violence at a community level. The systemic approach applied in the common country analysis allows us to analyze possible impacts on the most vulnerable communities for the UN country team to build action plans addressing multiple government sectors beyond the response partners, and also influence the priority areas of the cooperation framework here in El Salvador for the incoming years, such as social welfare, economic transformation, and inclusive and sustainable peace. We consider this tool very valuable and is very relevant for the planning processes of the United Nations development actions at the country level. Thanks again for UNDRR for its contribution with this tool, and I hope you derive the maximum benefit from this session. Thank you very much.
And a big thank you to the UNRC from El Salvador. I will now switch. As I said, I would give you an overview of the onboarding process. I'll maybe have a quick look now at the humanitarian program cycle. You'll find all of these on the portfolio page. This one is much richer. As you can see, it has a handful of modules. There's 4 modules. The opening module is largely, it's quite similar to the one we just seen, because it is related to the key concepts, the foundational information that's needed to understand what is risk and how does it fit into the country planning process. So I'm going to skip directly to module 2 on this one to give you an idea of some of the more technical content that's available. As I said, you will need to register for these, but registration is free and you'll have easy access to them. So as you can see, this is a more intensive one. This is designed for technical staff. This is something that is meant to sort of complement the kinds of support that UNDRR would have offered previously to humanitarian country teams in working through the HNO process, working through the needs overview and the planning, and finding out what really is needed to make sure that the planning documents, the planning processes are sufficiently risk informed. The idea behind this is that as we make use of the online training in collaboration with the facilitated training, this starts to give a little bit more independence, a little bit more autonomy to the country teams. If we are not able to go year after year, but there are new staff cycling in, it's a good opportunity again to bring new people on board. The navigation is the same. The foundational information is the same, although some of the abbreviations you'll find are a lot more humanitarian focused in this case. Joint intersectoral analysis framework is something that you wouldn't find in the CCA, for example, the humanitarian response plan. In this case, the learning objectives are a little bit more technical, a little bit more focused. And after I go through this one, I'll ask my colleague, Jali Shah, to give us a little, I guess, a bit of feedback from the experience in Yemen. So as you see, the table of contents is very familiar, and we have still the capacity to skip through using the menu on the left here to find different elements that are important. I'll begin with the beginning. In this case, again, giving really the background of what are the steps, what are the phases of the HPC, the humanitarian program cycle, with a bit more information under each of these to make it easy for participants, either on their own or in a facilitated setting, to learn different aspects and refresh their memory if they're not remembering. What is preparedness? What is contingency planning? What is anticipatory action? And what is readiness? And how do these fit into the overall planning process? Same with the needs assessment. We have both a global and a national option here to click through and have a bit more information in understanding how these things work, understanding how the resource is relevant and useful for the process at hand. Some of what I think is the more useful, the more interesting information are these process diagrams. I think UNITAR has done an excellent job in sort of showing how the steps connect one to the other, making it really easy for new users to enter this and recognize that there is a flow to this, there is a logic behind all of this, and how they fit into the system. Each of these phases has a little bit more detail in it. Let me advance from here. You can see as I advance on the navigation, it advances on the navigation page on the side as well. Emergency preparedness, and now we can go into the process overview, for example. Here you can see the main steps, and each of these, again, has a little bit more information, making it really easy for new users or people needing to refresh themselves to understand where we are in the process. Where there's a little eye here that gives access to more information, in this case, a link directly to the OCHA step-by-step guide, making it really easy to use this information in collaboration with the other work from the other UN agencies, other partners, and showing that there is a foundation to this, that there's a logic and a foundation that will continuously be updated. We can go into the Humanitarian Needs Overview here. And this is only module 2, remember. So this is really giving an idea of what is the HPC step-by-step guide, how are these elements going to be used. Module 3 and 4 start to get into even more details, how to fetch the information, how to put it all together, how to make use of it in the planning process. So here, as I said, we've got the joint intersectoral analysis framework, links to the objectives, the pillars that underpin these, and how the context is put into, is put into use in the event of an event, recognizing that there's going to be impact, that results in new cases of humanitarian need, and that there's the important purpose of doing this is to make sure that we understand what is the foundation so that we're ready in the event of an eventual event. The situation analysis has these documents, and if you click on the PDF here, it opens up the original link so that you can print that or refer to it later as a sort of aide memoire. And lastly, what is the joint analysis approach? This is leading up to the most technical module, which is module 3, which is the really how to do this, the technical steps. And we'll have a look at that for the CCA in just a moment. What you see here is kind of an interesting one. This gives links to an agenda for a workshop. This is not, this is a suggested agenda, but this is sort of saying that if you wanted to do this process properly, you would anticipate 10 to 15 days to do the, to fill in some of the core information, the foundational information, 1 day to have a workshop for facilitators to select participants, 2 hours then to get through this. So this is not, these are not the rules, but these are ways that we're sort of identifying what is the process, what does it take to do this the right way, the step-by-step way, to make sure that you have a good planning process, that it's following the right steps, and the same with the response planning. So that is module 2. There are the two modalities, as it says, but I really like that it has these flow charts so that you can see who should we be bringing into this, to this part of the process. What is the step-by-step approach? What do we do together? What do we do coordinated? What needs to be produced at the end of it? Who are the participants and what are the roles? And again, there's the PDF linking to enablement law so that you get to those end states with something that looks like what it's supposed to look like. You know, what are the steps and how does it flow through to get you the good humanitarian needs overview useful for that planning process. So that's the end of this module. I'm going to stop sharing for a moment and switch over and see if my colleague Jolly can join us and give a little bit of background about how the process went in Yemen. Jolly, are you there? Jolly, can you hear me? Maybe we'll give her a moment. I can continue with the other. The other tab. And we can continue and see if she can join us in a moment then. I will start sharing again.
Sorry, I wasn't able to unmute myself for some reason. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for this opportunity. Let me just project my screen.
Are you able to share?
Yes, but for some reason, I don't know whether it's the slow internet of Yemen or what's going on, that it's taking forever.
Problem. We'll do it a second. It looks like it has just shut. Great. We can see it. Okay.
Can you see it now?
Yep. Please go ahead.
Well, I hope it's there. Thank you very much, Adam and colleagues, for this opportunity. I would just like to build further on what Adam was saying about using it in the humanitarian planning, which we do with Humanitarian Needs Overview and Humanitarian Response Plan. Thanks to Marcus and his team that, visited Yemen last year, where we had a joint risk analysis workshop. So I'll quickly cover in terms of, the process and the outputs and how we went about it. So starting with, what we did as part of this workshop, which of course the colleagues had to organize in 2 locations in Aden and Sana'a, given the, 2 authorities within 1 country situation that we have in Yemen. So starting in both workshops with, risk prioritization, development of scenario, and then informing the whole planning exercise that Adam just spoke about. With some of these outputs that we came came collectively to inform the HNO process, and thus also humanitarian response plan based on the needs. So Yemen has a very highly complex, risk landscape, and where we have multiple risks present in the country. And as you can see, that the conflict and the resultant economic deterioration, together with extreme climate events as a result of climate change, has really made a complex emergency. For now, what we are also dealing with is a very unique situation of economic warfare, where because of this north and south and two different authorities with monetary bifurcation, the country and the banking system is at the verge of collapse. So that's the biggest problem we are facing right now, which has impacted humanitarian response as well, with liquidity crisis that's facing the country. So it's very complex to work in Yemen with all these risks that are present here. So as you can see that the process that followed based on, you saw earlier the risk and the likelihood impact assessment, UNDRR colleagues that led this workshop, that we had different groups that were coming from the local NGOs, the international NGOs, UN agencies, in some cases also government or, representatives coming from certain departments, and clusters as well as UN agencies. We came together, different groups did work on this, and based on the likelihood impact that was agreed, you can see that the main risk and has risk categories were scored, and what the whole joint risk analysis, it allowed us to bring together all these people which otherwise never brought together, especially national NGOs, and applying this whole methodology that we just went through, navigating through other complexities, including political ones. A risk analysis was developed that informed the HNO. This looks very simple, but it was a very effective collective exercise that really made us understand that, how 13 governorates have very high risk of, conflict, followed by, what we have with floods and climate change related hazards that country continues to experience, also disease outbreak. And as you can see that, by each governorate, we had kind of ranking done, which informed the humanitarian needs overview. So this is what we had put in the humanitarian needs overview. And we had the corresponding, sorry?
We can only see the first slide. Do you want to scroll through to some of the other ones and show? I think you're talking about specifics that are on later slides. Yeah.
Can you see it? Because I did a slideshow, so you couldn't see other slides.
Slideshow, but we can see the slide clearly, and this is a very nice one.
Oh, okay. So my apologies. So this is what we came up with in terms of having the humanitarian needs overview that had the ranking of the risk by governorate, also corresponding population figures. So we had clear data on, how many people we expect, population, the likelihood, all of that was worked out, and that helped us to come up with the response plan. So that is in a nutshell, and my apologies that, you couldn't see the slide. I'll quickly just go through, what I was talking about in terms of ranking and the risk landscape of Yemen and the final results that we got as a result of this exercise. So that is all from my side. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Jolie. That was excellent, and really good to see the product of exactly this kind of resource in action. It's a demonstration that it really does lead to something. I'm going to go back to sharing my screen and have a quick look through, this time the CCA process. And then if there are any questions, we will be open for questions at the end. So as I said, we had a look at the technical element from the HNO process before. This time we'll have a look at the I guess, the richer side of what's inside the CCA training. And this one has, again, the same overview, same navigation. As you can see, though, there are a lot more steps. There are a lot more. This one really does get into the technical part, and this is where the meat of the training is. So I'll not go through each slide of this one. But as you see, the purpose or the objective of having the self-study possibility is really rich in this, because if somebody who has used the process last year and forgot the steps of the multidimensional risk analysis, they can quickly click to that, access the documentation, including links to the core documents, and understand what are the steps, how to do the exercise, how to refresh themselves for exactly the purpose that they're going through. We're going back to the beginning, to the introduction again. You can see really going through step by step the consultations, who should be in the room, how do you ensure the alignment with the strategic priorities, scoping the process, again, to make sure that, as you were saying, Jolly, everything is aligned with the specific and contextual needs of the country, setting the workshop objectives, again, very step by step, very explicit and with tested examples. This is how it has been done in the work that we've done with countries. Here, there are specific, the information about the new CCAs and the updates. So there are the two approaches. There are links to the actions anticipated and the outputs from each of these steps. And then we can go through and have a look at what's in the step. How does it go through? What are the relevant concepts? And expecting that some of these are quite foundational, some of these are a bit fundamental, but then getting into prioritizing hazards, which, as we just saw from Jolly's presentation, you saw which hazards were prioritized for Yemen, and there's a good reason for that. Not every country is facing the same priority risks, the same issues that are going to challenge their development plan or their peace process. The system is very step-by-step, and again, very nice to have these links to core documents, the foundational documents, showing again the link between what we're talking about in risk assessment and what's needed from humanitarian planning or development planning process. So we can have a look at what are the inputs, giving specific examples of interconnected and cascading hazards, the tipping points. Switch to this one. A link to the interconnected risk report, analysis and findings using the cooperation framework, and again, annotations to help the facilitator to figure out how to manage these groups, because this is something that in some cases it'll be facilitated, in some cases this would be a self-study process where members of the humanitarian country team or the humanitarian team or the development team would be able to go through this themselves. Skipping into the CCA update part, you can see sort of a bit of a description of the new process. Country teams are required to regularly update their CCAs, so it goes through the methods and the steps, updating the UNDRA. Again, tabs showing exactly how does this look. This is zoomed way out, but giving an idea of really what goes into these things and how do you go through and get the core information that's going to be needed to make those good risk-informed decisions. Scenario development examples. I'm going to skip now to the module 4 because it shows a number of examples, a number of resources and examples, and that'll be the last part before we close the session. And I'll do this in the CCA training. One video. And everything loads quite quickly. It's designed to be easily internalized and easily absorbed, even in low data contexts. But here you will see, again, following the same format, links to specific documents, specific examples, specific processes that are used in exactly, this one was done in 2023 in Somalia. And what is the process? And you can see the HRP linked directly here. This is the one that was completed in 2024. All of these tools are meant to be kept as up to date as possible. This is something that the SRSG mentioned himself, that we'll expect to see these continuously updated with new links to new resources, or as the processes change, to be able to keep these up to date. This is the example from Cameroon. What's interesting is that we have obviously the different language versions as well. So if you're looking for one in Spanish, we have the Guatemala example, which has the Spotlight and the HNO in 2023 for Guatemala. I think in Cameroon and is in English and in French. So you have good examples of both of these, showing exactly the process, what action is taken, and so on. And then the conclusions. So really, this is meant to be a resource that has everything that anybody would need to use to make either to update the CCA or to make a new CCA, integrating this risk assessment approach. I'm going to stop sharing here, and we'll see if there are any questions from the audience. And if not, I will thank you. Thank the moderator. I see, Laura, you're still with us. Thank you for staying with us. And thank, of course, the SRSG, Kamal Kishore, and Nikhil Seth from UNITAR for their presence, for their, I think, the importance that their presence demonstrates these projects have. So I see no questions in the Q&A. The link to the training is in the chat if you need to find it, and the it'll be available on the YouTube chat as well. In the comments on the YouTube stream, we'll have the link to the training material as well. Thank you very much, and good afternoon.